Located in the Indian Ocean in the Bay of Bengal lies an island about 23 miles square. That's about the same size as Guernsey, whose inhabitants are still of Stone Age, isolated from the rest of the world with no contact from modern man. They have no idea about simple things like electricity that we take for granted. They don't even know what a comb is, or a watch is, or a pen, let alone the internet or TV. These peoples are cut off from society, and that's exactly what they want. If you try to encroach on their land, their island, they'll defend it and kill you at the drop of a hat, if they knew what a hat was. I'm talking about the Indian territory of the North Sentinel Island, and today we're going to look at these people and how modern man has tried to communicate with them, but with devastating consequences. Known as the Sentinelese, it's thought they have lived there untouched for approximately 60,000 years. Anthropologists say they are descendants of the first humans. Come with me and discover a savage, indigenous tribe of folk that don't even know it's 21st century and just want to be left alone, isolated from the rest of the world. Part of the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago in the Indian Ocean, the island of North Sentinel was first discovered, by modern man at least, in 1771 by British surveyor John Ritchie aboard the Diligent, an East India survey vessel. He observed and noted a multitude of lights as they passed by the island. This was thought to be fires lit from the tribal inhabitants. The vessel didn't stop and just sailed past. It wasn't until another 96 years, 1867, that people first encountered the natives when during a summer monsoon, an Indian merchant ship, the Nineveh, run aground on a reef near the island and was shipwrecked. The 106 surviving crew made it to the beach. Everything seemed quiet at first, until out of the island's tree line emerged a savage tribe of folk with spears and arrows and started to attack the survivors. They managed to fend them off with sticks and stones for several days and nights, until eventually being rescued by a British Navy steamer. Word got around about the island and its natives, and 13 years later, in January 1880, an expedition led by Maurice Vidal Portman, a government administrator, landed on the very same beach. He had planned to research the whole island and its natives and their culture and customs. The expedition group found a network of pathways and several small abandoned villages, but no natives. The place was eerily quiet. The island is awash with dense forest, yet the group ventured in. After a few days, Portman stumbled across 6 natives, 2 adults, a man and a woman who seemed elderly, and 4 children whose age they could not guess. Instead of researching them on the island, the group kidnapped the 6 natives and took them back to Port Blair on the neighbouring Andaman Islands. One thing I forgot to mention is the fact that although the North Sentinel Island was untouched by modern folk, the neighbouring Andaman and Nicobar Islands had been semi-colonised. They even had a penal colony, of which will figure in this story a little bit later. Anyhow, Portman took these 6 natives to Port Blair, and very soon afterwards the 2 adults became ill. See, because the Sentinelese had never been in contact with any other folk, which Portman and his crew should have realised, their immune system was not adapted for our diseases. Even simple diseases like the common cold or flu or measles. Sadly, the elderly man and woman quickly died. The 4 children were rapidly returned to North Sentinel Island and placed on the beach. Out of guilt, Portman left gifts like coconuts and pots and pans beside them and returned to Port Blair. In 1883, the same Maurice Portman thought he heard gunfire coming from the North Sentinel Island and returned thinking it was a distress signal from another vessel. The sea would strangely recede and then advance again. It wasn't from the island. It turned out to be the eruption of Krakatoa volcano, some 1,500 miles away. Wow, what an eruption that must have been. Nonetheless, Portman left more gifts for the islanders. He went on to leave even more gifts in 1885 and again in 1887. His guilt must have been really eating him up good. But his kidnapping of natives set a precedent to any future visits. The natives were not happy, and rightfully so. In 1899, a small vessel was ordered to land on the island and assess anything it could. When the small crew landed, they were scared, but they ventured a small way in and assumed the population, because of the release of the 4 children, had been wiped out by disease. They reported back their findings. Also in 1899, remember I told you there was a penal colony set up in Port Blair on the Andaman Islands? When a convict escaped from the prison on a makeshift shaft and sailed all the way round to North Sentinel Island. He thought he had made it. He had escaped. But he was savagely killed when he landed on the beach. North Sentinel Island was left alone for a while after that. Folk were either too scared of the Sentinelese or thought that the island was now empty of occupancy. In 1947, India gained independence and declared North Sentinel Island as a territory. They left it alone, though, until 1967, when it was decided at first to see if there were any of the tribes still on the island. If so, they would start what was known as several friendly contact approaches. An anthropologist by the name of Trilanath Pandit set up a team, including some of the neighbouring now colonised tribal leaders, and headed off to the island with good intent. They landed on the island and began hesitantly making tracks into the dense forest. They came across 18 well-built huts and could feel, even though they couldn't see, the natives watching them. The team started to feel uneasy and they quickly retreated back to their boat. These natives don't forget, and he and his team were chased with hostility. They made it back to the boat but managed to leave gifts. Pandit refused to give up on this friendly contact research, and this repeat expedition would go on for another 24 years. In 1974, a film crew from a TV documentary team were convinced they could win over the Sentinelese. It was for a documentary titled Man in Search of Man. Although they got what is probably the best photo and film footage ever taken of the islanders in their coloured waistbands and their primitive headgear and simple jewellery, the film director was shot in the thigh by an arrow, and they too retreated and went home with their tails between their legs. Although these natives of North Sentinel Island were only about 30 miles from modern day living, they were living themselves as Stone Age peoples and were not willing to accept any outside contact. I think Maurice Fidel Portman put pay to that, don't you? Just 1 year later, in 1975, the former King of Belgium, Leopold III, thought his ranking in life could sway things. He organised a cruise to take him to North Sentinel Island, and yes, you've guessed it, he was chased off the island never to return again. Savages was a word he constantly repeated. Serves himself right for his arrogance. 2 shipwrecks happened in a short time around the North Sentinel Island. The first, MV Russley, a small cargo ship, ran aground in 1977. Records of this shipwreck are scarce, and the crew numbers are unknown, but the mostly wooden ship disintegrated and was never salvaged. A bigger, more notable ship hit the coral reefs off the island on August 2nd, 1981. The wreckage of MV Primrose, a large container ship, is still visible on the island's coast to this day. The event is significant because it marked one of the rare instances where the outside world briefly interacted with the Sentinelese people in a context not initiated by exploration or contact seeking. The crew of the Primrose reportedly observed men carrying spears and arrows building boats on the beach shortly after the wreck. This encounter further solidified the Sentinelese reputation for hostility towards outsiders and underscored the perilous nature of approaching the island. The captain of the Primrose radioed through an urgent drop for firearms so his crew could defend themselves. They did not receive any because a large storm stopped other ships from reaching them, but the heavy seas also prevented the islanders from approaching the ship. A week later, the crewmen were rescued by a helicopter under contract to the Indian Oil and Natural Gas Corporation. The Sentinelese tribe are thought to have plundered the wreckages and from then on had metal tips to their arrows. In 1991, salvage operators were authorised to dismantle the ships. In the same year, Mr. Pandit, the anthropologist who first attempted to contact the tribe back in 1967, arranged for another team to visit the island. Himself, plus another anthropologist, a police team, and some Andaman locals arrived at the island, but at first kept their distance. They threw coconuts into the water. To their surprise, some of the Sentinelese who were at first hostile, began to approach their boat. After all the coconut gifts had finished, a few of Pandit's crew courageously jumped out of the boat and into the shallow waters. Amazingly, the tribe welcomed them, but only while they were in the water or slightly on the beach. As soon as anyone encroached too far, they became hostile again. The local tribe even started to prod some of the crew as if they were curious of their paler skin. The visit had been a success, but as it turned out, it would be the one and only success. Any future visits were met with hostility once again. They always accepted the gifts, but interaction or approach was to be no more. In 1997, a crisis developed on the neighbouring Andaman Islands. The original tribes and native peoples of these islands had been colonised over the years, and the colonialists or government of the island began to act a tad complacent with regards to these ex-tribal peoples and were encouraged to integrate within the island's setup. The former tribesmen, although schooled in British traditions and values, started to roam the streets and housed villages naked. The new locals were not happy and began to ridicule them. This led to bitterness between the locals and the tribesmen. Several tribesmen stormed a police station, killing a policeman with arrows. It was determined that more time was needed to educate all on the island, and it was ordered that all expeditions or visits to North Sentinel Island be cancelled for the foreseeable future. This was later known as the Jarawa crisis, and it was also determined, strangely, that the Andaman tribe's DNA was completely different and complex to any ever seen. Read into that what you will. All was quiet for a few years, and then the infamous 2004 Boxing Day tsunami hit the region. As seen on the news, the main devastation hit islands and coastlines off Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and India. It killed over 227,000 people. Smack bang in the middle of this devastation was North Sentinel Island. After most of the mayhem had subsided, 2 helicopters were ordered to go and clear up the mess caused on North Sentinel Island. To everyone's surprise, the Sentinelese were hardly disrupted. The island had been hit, but the natives had surprisingly coped. When one of the helicopters approached the island, it was once again met with hostility. 2 tribal warriors, yelling loudly, raised their bow and began to fire arrows at the helicopter. Both rescue helicopters retreated and headed back to Port Blair. The resilience of the North Sentinel Island natives was incredible. They might be primitive Stone Age type folk compared to us, but they seemed to know how to protect themselves from everything thrown at them. The 3-mile no-go zone set up by the Indian government was strengthened after this, and Indian naval ships patrolled its perimeter. In 2006, though, 2 fishermen encroached the zone. The 2 were drunk, and their small fishing boat drifted towards North Sentinel Island. Before they could act accordingly, it ran aground. The 2 drunken men were captured by the Sentinelese and savagely killed. Their bodies were never recovered. The Andaman Island police chief recalled their horrific fate, stating that the 2 bodies were hooked to stakes on the beach and displayed like scarecrows. The authorities decided not to act upon these murders, further enhancing the protection of the Sentinelese natives. It was later discovered that the 2 bodies had eventually been buried on the beach by the natives. An organisation called Survival International was set up to protect the North Sentinel Island natives, and it was strictly forbidden for anyone to breach the 3-mile zone. Although the murders of 2 fishermen was both wrong and savage, the locals respected this zone, and the Sentinelese lived a quiet life untouched by the outside world. Until 2018, when a missionary by the name of Chow brought it upon himself to try and spread the teachings of Jesus to the island. Cleverly planned, Chow organised a trip to the island, paying a few of the locals a fair bit of money to take him there. It wasn't totally irresponsible, as Mr. Chow had self-quarantined for 11 days before setting off. On November the 14th, 2018, with diary and Bible in hand, Chow set off to the island. They laid up short of the island for the first day, watching for any natives. None came. So it was decided that the following day, November the 15th, he would approach the island and try to contact the natives. As he stepped onto the beach, he was greeted by some natives who wore painted yellow faces and painted red noses. It sounds like a joke, but it ain't. They, of course, were very hostile, and Mr. Chow quickly retreated back to his boat. Overnight, John plucked up the courage to again approach the natives the following day. He did so. On the 16th of November, John Chow boarded his small kayak and landed on the beach. As the natives quickly approached, John parroted their words in an attempt to subdue their anger. It briefly worked, and some of the natives laughed at his attempt at their language. But it didn't last long, as one of the younger tribe shot an arrow directly at Mr. Chow. Luckily, the metal-tipped arrow hit his Bible. Miracle or irony? John hastily retreated, but the natives had stolen his kayak. Fearing for his life, John Chow, with arrows whizzing past his head, swam back to the boat. He made it unharmed. Now, you would have thought that would have been reason not to return, but Mr. Chow was determined to sell Christianity to these people, and as he wrote in his diary, although he preferred to live, he would attempt it again the next day and leave his fate in God's hands. So the following day, November the 17th, he approached the natives yet again. Convinced he could win them over, John Chow was killed on this day. His body was buried in a shallow grave on the beach by the Sentinelese. You can't say he wasn't warned. In his diary, he also requested that if he was killed, that no one should attempt to recover his body and to find it in their hearts to forgive the natives. John Chow's body was never recovered, and his father, although angry at his son's death, blamed the evangelical group that had coerced John into Christianity and not the natives. What do you think? Is his dad correct? Now, I don't know if it's just me or is this world producing more and more idiots day after day. I say this because recently, in March 2025, an American YouTuber by the name of Mylo Polyov, armed with a GoPro, set himself the task to land on North Sentinel Island and film it for his YouTube channel. When he got there, he stood on the beach with a whistle. Luckily for him, no natives came out, so he left a coconut and a can of Diet Coke on the beach. One irresponsible and selfish idiot. If anyone meets with these Sentinelese natives nowadays, it could wipe out the whole population. It is thought that there are somewhere between 40 and 500 natives on this island, men, women and children. For the sake of a channel views, he was willing to do this. He was arrested and charged and will be sentenced to up to 5 years imprisonment. Does he deserve that? For risking the lives of a whole population on an island? I know my thoughts, but what's yours? There are some that think this island is protected for other reasons. Some think the island is home to a top secret base. Their theory is that the locals, despite limited food and resources, are surprisingly very well nourished, even to the point of large muscles. They don't look dirty nor unkempt, and they seem to survive very easily and are thriving, including disease and the 2004 tsunami. They say that the 1981 shipwreck was staged and put there as supplies. In the past, Marco Polo described the island as Satan's last stronghold. He hadn't visited it, but he still said it nonetheless. Some even think that this alleged top secret base is a base for government experiments. I dismiss nothing. So I ask you, should the natives of North Sentinel Island be left alone to live as Stone Age folk? Should the governments intervene and hold them responsible for the deaths on the island? Is it a hidden island with top secret intentions? If you look at Google Earth, the island shows nothing apart from dense forest. Would it be easy to hide something? Is it India's Area 51? Is it an island for certain folk to carry out their ritualistic practices? Or is it just an island with Stone Age natives that want nothing to do with us greedy, self-obsessed people? You be the judge. Thanks for watching. What say you? I feel sorry for these folk. They know not of our ways. But what do you think? Please tell us in the comments. Here's one for you. If Keir Starmer, David Cameron and Tony Blair were stranded on a desert island, who would survive? Answer: the United Kingdom. Anyhow, please consider pressing that like button. It really helps get the video out there to others, because I get no help from YouTube. Must be getting too close to the truth sometimes, I guess. Hope you enjoyed the video. and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye for now.